Okay, so we're going to do another lecture now on informal fallacies. This one is going to be about 4 more fallacies. These are fallacies of relevance. So they're a little bit different than the conceptual fallacies that we looked at in the other lecture. These have to do with making claims that aren't relevant to the topic that you're arguing about. So let's jump right into it. So critical thinking, informal fallacies. 2, Jaws takes Manhattan. Joke there, it's an irrelevant thing. Anyway, here we go. So the first one we're going to look at is what we call an ad hominem fallacy. Okay, so this is where rather than responding to reasons that someone puts forward to make a claim, right, and sort of attacking the claim, you attack whoever it is that made the claim as if that's a reason to reject a claim, right? So it's when you attack the person who's making an argument instead of attacking the argument, right, in your own response to an argument. So for instance, my cousin says that college is a waste of time and money because I could learn everything they can teach me at college on my own at the public library. But that can't be right because my cousin doesn't have a college degree. So he just must be wrong. Could be possibly right, right? What we're doing here is we're saying that because my cousin, the person who says that I don't need to worry about going to college and that that's a waste of time, right? That there's something wrong with him, that's a reason not to engage his argument. That's a fallacy, right? We could engage his argument, right? We could sort of say like, maybe it's just not true that you can learn everything you learn at college at a public library, right? That college involves more than just knowledge transfer. It's about being in a community of learners together, right? And so you want to be there in that kind of environment, and that's just as valuable, right? And so you could never actually get that experience at a public library, right? You could make that kind of an argument, right? And that would be sort of to give reasons behind the counter claim, right? To say to reasons to believe that college is not a waste of time and money, right? But what we're doing here is we're just saying like, well, my cousin doesn't have a college degree, so what does he know, right? So it's not relevant to the argument. It's an external thing. So it can be kind of psychologically convincing, right? Like you can find yourself getting caught up in this stuff. Like, oh, what does he know? He's an idiot, right? Why should I listen to him? Well, maybe he's got a good argument, right? Even idiots have good arguments sometimes. So, so these things can kind of trick us because they can kind of pull us along psychologically, but they don't really give you like strong rational reasons to believe claims, right? Here's another one. My ethics professor says I should never lie because doing so contradicts the categorical imperative, and it always leads to bad consequences for the person who lies. But why would I believe her? She lies all the time, right? Well, sure, she might be a liar. That doesn't mean that you should lie, right? And it doesn't mean that her argument for why you should never lie is a bad one, right? In this case, we don't know what the categorical imperative is because this is an ethical class, so we're not covering this stuff, right? But we'd have to find out if this stuff is true and if it matters. And if you want to counter this position that you should never lie, well, then these are the things that you've got to question, not whether or not your ethics professor is a liar. Right? That doesn't matter. She might still have a good argument, even if she's a liar. So you should respond to the argument, not attack the person making the argument. Make sense? So that's what we call an ad hominem fallacy. All right, next one. This is it's called a straw man fallacy, and that's when you misrepresent someone else's position in order to make it easier to argue against it. Okay, people do this one all the time. Like these ones will be pretty easy to find examples of, especially if you watch any like cable news. Comes up a lot there, or if you read editorials and things like that. But yeah, you'll see stuff like this quite a bit, right? So here's an example, right? Someone comes along and says, hey, look, the children's winter concert at the school should include non-Christmas songs too, right? And then, someone comes along and says like, oh yeah, non-Christmas songs? Oh, I bet you just probably want Christmas songs to be banned completely. And we like Christmas songs around here, so we're not listening to you, right? That's not what this person is saying, right? They're saying, maybe we want some Hanukkah songs as well as Christmas songs at the winter concert, right? And maybe we want songs that are like kind of secular, just about like fucking, or friggin' I don't know, reindeer or something, right? And right, so what person B is doing here is misrepresenting person A's position, right? So as to make it an easier position to defeat, right? Person A is not saying no Christmas songs, because that's kind of absurd to say no Christmas songs, right? So it's easier to kind of refute that position than it is to actually engage person A's position, right? So you misrepresent your opponent in order to make it easier to defeat them. And politicians do this all the time. People on the radio do this all the time. People on cable news do this all the time, okay? All right, next one, genetic fallacy. This one is kind of fun, okay? So this is when you argue that just because something came from somewhere, that's a reason to reject it or accept it. So the origin of something, right, is a reason that it's good or bad, right? The origin of a claim or of an object or whatever, right? So, for instance, spaceflight was invented by the Nazis, so it must be bad for mankind, right? Because it came from Nazis. Just because it came from Nazis doesn't mean that it's all bad necessarily, right? You have to take it up on its own terms. Is spaceflight maybe good for mankind, even though it came from a bad place, right? This kind of thing happens a lot. I study this fella here. Oh, guy by the name of Martin Heidegger. He's probably one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. He was a Nazi, right? And people do make the claim all the time, right? Like we shouldn't be reading this guy because he was a Nazi, right? But people who study Heidegger kind of say like, well, just because the ideas in this book came from a Nazi doesn't mean that they are without any merit, right? And he doesn't talk about Nazi stuff in the book. He talks about, the nature of time and things like that, right? So, there are people who try to argue that his take on time is itself kind of Nazi by trying to engage the actual arguments that he makes, right? And that's okay. But just because it comes from Nazis isn't a reason to reject it. The reason to reject it is because it itself is bad, right? And people do make the argument that Heidegger's philosophy is bad, right? But they don't make the argument, but it shouldn't just come down to the fact that it comes from a bad place. Likewise, nuclear power was invented to kill people, so we shouldn't use it to power our homes, right? There might be reasons we might not want to use nuclear power to power our homes, right? I'm not an expert on these things, but someone who could come up with a list of reasons why I might not want to do that. One of them is probably not, well, it comes from the same research project that created nuclear bombs, right? Like that's irrelevant to whether or not this thing we have now is good or bad, right? You can go the other way too, right? Alcohol has been around forever. It was present in every great civilization, ancient Greece, Chinese dynasties, the Aztec and Mayan empires, they all had alcohol. So alcohol must be good for everyone, right? It comes from these great civilizations, so it must be good. Not necessarily true, right? Alcohol, if you want to know if alcohol is good or not, bad or not, you might want to look at how it affects people now and, who it's good for and who it's bad for, and so on and so forth, right? And it probably has nothing to do with who invented it or where it comes from. Okay, so that's the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is about arguing with the origin of something is a reason for taking it, or that it's good or bad, or rejecting it or accepting it. Okay, then this last one? Anyway, this is the appeal to authority. This is when you appeal to an irrelevant authority, right? You use the opinion of an irrelevant authority as a reason to accept a claim, okay? So notice, appealing to a relevant authority might be okay, okay? So like, I don't know a lot about nuclear power, right? So I might take the opinion of someone who does know a lot about nuclear power to be better than mine as a reason for accepting a claim, right? So like, you know, I might accept my physics teacher's opinions about electrons because they're physicists and they know, right? But it's not okay to just appeal to authority or use an authority's opinion when their authority isn't relevant. So for instance, like a physicist told me that it's okay to lie, right? This kind of thing isn't good, right? Because a physicist doesn't know anything about morality necessarily, not because they're a physicist, right? So it doesn't authorize you to say whether or not it's okay to lie, right? And so this is another one that pops up a lot, right? So take this for example, right? Most doctors oppose abortion on moral grounds. When polled, doctors are pro-life at a rate of almost 2-to-1. Therefore, abortion must be morally wrong. Right? What do doctors know about whether or not it's morally wrong? Right? I would expect doctors to know about, you know, whether it's safe, right? Whether people survive it, right? I wouldn't expect a doctor to know about whether it's morally right or wrong, right? So look, there might be a lot of reasons to say that abortion is morally wrong, but just because doctors think that, that's not a great reason, right? Give me a real reason that pertains to the morality of it, not just the opinion of someone who I don't know if they know anything about abortion and morality, right? Likewise, you know, you get this kind of thing. Leonardo DiCaprio says that climate change is real and that I should care about it, right? Why the hell would I listen to Leonardo DiCaprio about climate change? What does he know about it? He's a frigging actor, right? So these are not good reasons to accept the conclusions of these arguments, right? They're completely irrelevant to what you're actually arguing for, right? They're psychologically convincing, right? Because we think of doctors as authoritative and we think of movie stars as authoritative. We just think like those people are famous or smart, and so their opinion must be worth more than mine, right? But unless there's some reason that their opinion actually is worth more than yours on this particular issue, it really doesn't give you any kind of strong rational reason to believe them, right? So a good argument for these propositions, right, would be relevant to those propositions. Oh, geez. Okay, so those are the four sort of fallacies of relevance. Okay, you can read about them. There are two more actually in the textbook, but those are the only four I'm gonna make sure that you know. Okay, but you can read about all that in the textbook on 4.3, and then you can take the quiz. Okay, so if you need anything, you got any questions about this stuff, just shoot me an email and we'll have a chat. Until next time.